So this is the engine and trans episode. You may see off to the side here a Modelo amongst all these really cool Holley Performance parts.
This one's just got big runner diameter, so there's a lot of volume in there. You know, a big throttle body with an IAC and a TPS on it, but it looks sick. Hanging out. A friend I grew up with.
Some stuff, you know?
We designed this short throw shifter for the transmission. Trans is on.
Yeah, you're in. 100%.
Super pumped to have this thing.
Excuse me.
Have this handy. Welcome to United by Trucks. We are on location at Level 7 Motorsports. I know this is one of you guys' favorite places and it's certainly one of mine. We're actually here to do some really cool stuff. This is the engine and trans episode. So in the last episode, you saw me start tearing down the OBS and get kind of frustrated at what I was finding. And I promised you that we were going to be doing something cool. So we're here in Marion, Illinois, and we're ready to show you some cool stuff. So we're going to get this crate open, show you what's in it, tell you all about it, and then talk about the trans that we're going to be mating to this thing. We got some special guests coming through, so this is a pretty all-encompassing episode on the drivetrain for our 88 OBS Brownie. All right, real quick before we tear into anything, I got to give a big shout out to Jesse before I even tell you what's in this box for really helping me secure this motor and speccing every single component from Holley that's going on this. And he's got a couple of specific reasons as to why he specced them the way he did, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But at least say thank you and recognize that you're here and not just standing over there behind the camera.
Yeah, well, you know, I'm always happy to help, not just you because you're my friend, but any of you guys that are looking for some advice. It makes me have a little bit of joy, kind of seeing the right parts bought, and I think this will be like a killer combination. And it just totally fit the bill. Like, this motor made sense.
Yes.
Like, not a lot of times buying a brand new crate engine is financially the right decision, but I think that this one fit exactly what you needed to do and what you were trying to do going another route.
Yeah.
This just cost like a little bit more.
And guys, you know we put a crate 350 in mud, and that was like my first ever crate engine at all, but I'm gonna go ahead and tell you, this is an LS, and it's an awesome LS. It's one I'm really proud to have. I think it's gonna do exactly what we needed to do for the mission of this truck.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you guys want to look up this engine, it's one of the new GM 6-liter iron block engines. So the scenario that GM kind of thought into was if you already had like a 24-tooth 5.3, like a Gen 3 5.3 or 6-liter, and so you already had that EFI system, this would be like a little bit of a hopped up replacement for one of those older engines.
Yeah.
So I'm sure a lot of you guys know that nowadays it's a little bit hard to find like a really good 6-liter. They're
for sure
a pretty old engine now,
yep.
And a lot of them have either been pulled and beat up or they've just got a lot of miles on them.
Yep.
So this does cost something, but it's a brand new engine with aluminum LS3 cylinder heads and an LS9 camshaft, and none of the stuff that you don't need.
Yeah.
You know, there's no intake manifolds that you're just going to throw away to buy something different.
That's
it's
right.
pretty much like a performance long block to replace like a Gen 3 motor that you guys would have already had. So.
Yeah, so it's LQ9 bottom end. As Jesse said, it's 823 LS3 heads. It's already got the hollow stem intake valves that everybody wants. It's really got all of the performance upgrades like a rectangle port, but the LQ9, which is a Gen 360 bottom end. So you get a little bit higher compression. It's 10.3 to 1 compression, and you get all the goodies that everybody wants in the LS3 823 heads.
Yeah.
And GM just puts it all in one package, sends it to you in a crate, and then we can go have fun and bolt on all this other stuff that we want to really make it perform.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know there could be a situation where you're like, well, you're starting off from brand new, like you might as well spend a little more buying LS3, which you are completely true. But in this situation, we're trying to play out a scenario where you would have already had a 24-tooth EFI system, or you would have had a vehicle that was equipped for that EFI, and you needed to replace it with something better instead of trying to buy like a remanufactured manufactured short block and then hunting for heads.
Yep.
This is the situation that Robbie was in.
That's exactly
trying
right.
to do all this piecing together.
Yep.
It kind of wasn't like one thing would work out, the other wouldn't, and so this was like the all-inclusive recipe.
It solved all the problems. I have an LQ4, but LQ4s have lower compression. We were going to have a bit of time trying to get the compression up to where we wanted it to be, over 10 even.
Yeah.
And so I started trying to source an LQ9 bottom end because we knew we could get the compression up a little bit more with an LQ9 bottom end. Those are even harder to come by than I ever thought they'd be.
Yeah.
So this ended up being the ultimate solution, and I think it's just going to get us up and going very quickly and give us reliability, give us a warranty, all that great stuff that comes along with a crate engine.
Yep, and with the compression ratio that this has, this is a great motor to build upon in the future. I mean, we can do a higher lift cam, more duration. We got some other parts that'll accept that kind of that kind of stuff, but this is a totally good platform to build upon, and I think the future of this motor, it's wherever you want it to be.
Yeah, there's no end, I think.
Yeah,
like you said, we can upgrade cam, we can mill heads to even get more compression if we needed to. This is just a really great foundation for what we're trying to do with this truck, and that's get out on the course, rip it up, whether it's an autocross or road race. I'm just dipping my toe into this, but I'm just saying that, you know, based on your expertise and others in the industry, like this is a great platform to just grow from.
It is, and if you guys remember Keith Sadler's truck, the blue and white square body, he has a very similar combination, a 6-liter with a good set of heads and a good camshaft, and that truck rips. Like, it feels really, really good. It's not overpowered, especially if you're trying to learn. You definitely don't need more torque than what you need. You need a little bit more peak RPM, a higher RPM peak power, and kind of like some of the other parts that we put together, I think are going to do that just totally right for what you need.
Yeah, and to be clear on that, this is a 450 horse motor straight out of the crate. It is built to redline to 69 or 7,000 RPM, so it's right where we need it to be. You know. So why don't we dig into this thing and we'll talk more about it.
Sounds great.
Thanks, dude.
This actually came from the GM Performance shop at Gandrud Chevrolet. Big thanks to Jason for helping us spec this thing out, and just super pumped to have this thing. We're gonna really make some good use of it in this truck, and we're gonna show you here in just a minute all the great parts we're gonna put on it. So we're gonna put a lift plate on this thing, get it up where we can start dressing it out.
You know what year I got this cherry picker?
What year?
2001.
It looks like it's been around for a minute.
Yep. One of my buddies bought me this so that I would put an H22 in his Civic Hatch. And I did it in my backyard in the grass.
That's probably a pretty good deal for him.
Yeah. Oh yeah, he bought this at Rural King for $199. It could either have a 4-pulse cam sprocket or it could have a 1-pulse cam sprocket. I'd have to pull the sensor and look through there and see how many nuggets are on there, but I bet you this has got a 4X cam sprocket on it, because I think, you guys probably know this more than I do, I think that there was like 1 year GTO that was like a 24.4. I think it was like one of the LS2 years or something, but it does have the spot back here for the 1X pulse off the back of the crank, which what we're going to use, or you're going to have to put one in it no matter what to seal the block back here. But it's kind of interesting that they went ahead and put like an LS2 or LS3 front timing cover with a sensor in it too.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah.
They do give you this though.
Don't use this. So if it says that, if it says not for use in Gen 3, that means that it has to be a 4-pulse.
Okay, yeah. Very cool. I wonder what else we're going to discover.
I don't know, it's pretty cool.
It is pretty cool. Man, that breeze coming in from outside.
You feel good? You guys didn't hear this a second ago, but all these motors generally have oil in them. And it's because they run them on a Spintron, and since this one doesn't have like coils and injectors and all that stuff, they don't actually run them, like fire them, but they have a machine called a Spintron, and I don't exactly know how it works. I think it runs on compressed air or, yeah, there you go. It may not have a ton of oil in it, but it generally has oil in them. Yeah. But there's also, we saw on top, there's a little bit of oil spilled on where the oil pressure sending unit went. So they can test to make sure that it does have oil pressure and that it's got compression and all that stuff. And Once it passes the Spintron, they ship it out.
Never mind, don't need them. Pan off on the hood.
We want to kind of like get that flush on the backside.
This is what I like when I'm here.
You didn't like morels?
Those were not morels, those were something else.
Mushrooms?
I like mushrooms.
Don't too, man. I was scared of some mushrooms.
Did not like. They were some kind of different tribal.
Morels are like on a whole different level. Okay, we got it down on the cart. After getting the oil pan on, Gee, say what's up. Gee, say hey. Now we get to put all this fun stuff on, and we'll tell you what each of it is as we do it.
This is just a big Plunum single plane intake manifold. They make these now in a 2-piece. You can take them apart. You can hand port all the runners if you wanted to. This one's just got big runner diameter, so there's a lot of volume in there. And it does give you multi-port injectors still, but gives you that vintage look, you know, where the throttle body is, you know, a big throttle body with an IAC and a TPS on it. The air temperature sensor is loaded in it already.
And is this cool, like gray, what do you call it? What'd you say you called that?
This is a hard coat. Yeah, this is a hard coat anodized. And then this is just a powder coat on this. But it looks sick. Then
I mean, I think it looks insanely sick.
And in a pickup truck, we got all the room in the world under the hood, so you run a big 14-inch air cleaner. Yeah. And then this one's got plenty of provisions, and one of the things that I like so much about it is that we can run a stock style map sensor. It's got this little plate on the side that comes off, and then we can bolt the map sensor to it.
Perfect.
Which is kind of neat.
So cool. Yeah, I mean, even the ports are all impressive looking. I mean, it just looks really cool. And like you said, split design, so you can take it apart. 2-piece design, so you can take it apart if you want to do all the porting and stuff. But
yeah, and the manifold comes with the rails and the brackets, and then you went ahead and got the set of 42-pound injectors.
Yep.
Picked what throttle body you wanted. You could put a carburetor on. You could do whatever you wanted.
I think what's going to be cool about this is like an 88 still has, even though it's TBI, it still has the air cleaner on it, like a you know, like an old school. So I think this is going to fit super well. And I think the key for you speccing all this out is like, and this is the same thing you did on mud, like with brakes and stuff, like we can grow.
Something you learn after doing autocrossing for a while is you really don't want a bunch of torque. It kind of hurts you unless you've got great suspension and it can grip really, really well. You need kind of a second for the suspension to have time to react. So I like to make more peak power. You can kind of get on it out of a corner and then it kind of slingshots you. So this intake manifold design and then a future camshaft that you could do would make more power up top. So a lot of the guys that are doing LT4s and stuff like that, they are awesome, but they are really hard to harness any kind of that power coming out of a corner. It's just too much torque, really. So I think that you're going to be happy with this.
Oh, I know I am. I know I am.
All right, guys, just a reminder, we are going to mock this intake up because I'm going to change the valley cover to one that doesn't have the knock sensor provisions in it. So I'll go home, change the valley cover, put the O-rings in the bottom of the ports there of the intake. But I want to get this fully dressed, show you guys what it looks like. And that'll just give me a little less to do at home too.
I've ran into that probably 4 times now where dudes buy like a really high-end like roadster shop chassis, and then they buy his 16-inch brakes. And then the piston surface area is massive.
Yeah.
So they almost have to do Hydro Boost because they have so much piston surface area.
Well, and I may end up having to do something like that, man. I haven't looked into it as much. I was going more for the aesthetic
killer,
on that truck.
It's killer for, if you've got a Hydro Boost and those big brakes, I mean, it's killer, but it's not for what I do, you know?
Right.
It's too much rotational mass. Yeah. It's too much unsprung weight. It's too much assist in the pedal. Like there's a lot of downfalls.
I'm going more for aesthetic on that behind.
Oh yeah.
You know, on that truck.
Yeah.
But no, this truck is, you know, gonna have. We'll do the wheelwood setup again.
Yeah.
Some way, shape, or form. Put a little more there.
Dab will do you.
Just got a little thicker.
All right. Trade you out.
I'll just throw these caps all over the floor.
these are 42 pound. I think they're sniper. I think they're labeled snipers, but
Yep.
these are the high impedance 42 pound injectors, and they are the LS3 size and LS3 EV6 connector.
Boom.
Boom. And wicked affordable.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember what the cost was.
400 and something bucks a set or something.
Yeah. Not expensive at all.
And the other
Not
great
for what
thing,
injectors are.
if you guys have ever tried to do any kind of tuning software, the first step is putting injector data into the ECU. And the nice thing about buying Holley's injectors is they preload all the injector data. So you literally click this part number and it'll tabulate all the injector data.
Oh, that's sweet.
So it takes a lot of work out of it. Well, I put this one in upside down.
Sound like something I'd do.
Gosh, I put two of them in upside down. Just talking about smart stuff.
I mean, it's not UBT if you don't have to do it twice. That'd be nice and satisfying going in there.
I think I'm gonna put a little more, or
Yep.
just put a little around this edge.
Right. Since I've already got it all over me.
Mm-hmm.
I'll do this first one again because I wasn't doing it the same way. I wasn't really getting in there.
Oh, yeah.
The whole satisfactory pop, too.
You hear that?
Sure did. So what we figured out on the other side, guys, is that we need to put these brackets on first and then run the rail down in there.
Speaking of running the rail, when I first moved to Marion, this was like 2001, so it was still big into like import drag racing.
Yeah.
And we all used to go up to the high school and drag race. And they have where the high school parking lot is, there's a guardrail, a K-rail, and you'd turn the corner, and at the start of the gate, or start of the K-rail to the end of the K-rail was an 1/8 mile.
Oh my gosh.
So we would always go up there, and we call it running the rail.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome.
We'd all go up there and
That'd make a great
drag
shirt
race
slogan.
our Civics.
That'd make a great shirt slogan.
Run the rail.
Running the rails. Running rails. Let's get that satisfying pop here.
I gotta spread my bracket open a little bit.
Did you torque these to anything particular? Or did you just snug them?
There it went. Gosh, this is really nice.
Yeah, man. I dig it.
Couple things. Come eat? Yes. Okay. I thought that was coming.
Say what?
I thought that was coming.
Let me throw this last one in here. So she was supposed to tell us.
We were just in here like, I wonder if she was actually supposed to tell us earlier.
Yeah.
Because she was like, are you guys coming in to eat or coming out here?
Well, we're just-
and then just a second ago, we were like, I wonder if that was meant to say come in.
I was like, what are we supposed to be doing?
We're out here chewing Big Red. This stuff smells like Big Red. Oh my gosh, like so much so.
There you go.
Oh, now we go.
We used to do this all the time.
Give it kind of a, there you go. Whoa.
Shit.
Snap.
So we in. All right, guys, so we're back on, and Jesse just went ahead and set this rascal on.
Sorry, I jumped the gun.
That's all right. Don't y'all like this? It looks so good.
I love it.
I love the way it looks. Absolutely. You want to throw the valve covers on?
Yeah.
Is that what you were thinking?
That'll be a big payoff.
We should probably talk a little bit about this throttle body, though. So it's a 1000 CFM EFI throttle body.
Manifold port style injection, not TBI style. Back in the day when Terminator EFI first came out,
Yep.
it was this throttle body with an injector in each barrel.
Okay.
And so there was 4 80-pound injectors in it. This is just the version that's just air, you know, so there's no, this is much better, you know, so you've got normal multi-port fuel injection with the classic look, progressive linkage, you know, all the stuff that you need.
And boy, does it look good. We're gonna put a nice big air cleaner right on top of it.
Gosh,
Also, what's cool is like we just got this engine just set aside right here in the space.
in the middle
in
of
the
the
middle of
room.
the shop. I love it. Boom. Oh yeah, you can see that oil in there. Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. All right guys, so we got the gasket transferred over for the valve covers and the factory hardware bolts with the little gasket there transferred over from the original valve cover. So we're just gonna throw these on real quick and then show you what it's like to throw the valve cover on. All right, so we're torquing these to 90-inch pound. Yeah, it just feels weird to say inch and then pound.
Yeah. My newest toy.
Ooh.
It's just a hydraulic crimper for all the fittings that we use. But these are just so much faster to assemble and they're fast to crimp. So like, this is pretty simple. Like you can buy all the dies in the world that you ever wanted to get, but I just bought a couple, well, I bought a few now. They're kind of expensive, but you literally just, you know, you put the die that you need in there and you got to do some math. Every manufacturer has a stated like finish crimp. Mm-hmm. So this one's supposed to be 3/4 once it's crimped. So what I do is you do a little bit of math to convert it to metric, and then this is just a little plunger that when it hits this red light, you just stop crimping. Yeah, so it's pretty cool.
Well, I'll be.
And then you just double check them. You just grab a mic and. So I'm gonna crimp this one just a little bit more. It's supposed to be 3/4 and it's
okay.
7/60. But that's it. Put it back in there.
Till it hits the red light.
Pretty snazzy.
Easy enough. Mm-hmm. Can't beat that at all.
Yeah, so I'll crimp the other one real quick and we'll throw it on.
Even.
Yeah, and it made like a chunk more power, and they were like, whoa, like we would have never.
We've been doing this all our lives.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it was Steve Dolchich and
and Freiberger.
The last people that probably would just say go put 3-inch on everything.
Yeah, boy, there we go. Missing simple stuff, you know.
Got a little bit done.
Oh yeah. I think that's gonna do it for this evening. We'll be back tomorrow. Just like I said, we're gonna do the mid-mount accessory drive on the front and then bolt the trans up, tell you all about it. We'll see you in the morning.
My name is Stephen Dorick. I own LOJ Conversions. We are primarily a Nissan LS swap company, but we've been branching out a lot lately with some Hemi swap products, Godzilla swap products, suspension products for Frontiers since I started racing my Frontier. So the company's growing and expanding, and we're here this weekend to help Robbie out with his OBS build with a manual transmission option for his truck that is not the typical swap transmission that a lot of guys use. A lot of guys will go T56 or maybe an old NV3500 or something like that, but this is a Nissan Frontier 6-speed manual rear-wheel drive transmission from an 05 and up V6 Frontier. They made those trucks for like a million years, not really, but 05 to 21 they made them, so there's a lot of these transmissions out there. Like I said, this weekend we're here to help out Robbie with one of these transmissions for his truck. This is a manual transmission, 6-speed manual from a 2005 and up Nissan Frontier V6. So the 4 cylinders were available with a manual as well, but that's a different trans, that's not what we're talking about here. V6 2-wheel drive. And if you know anything about the Nissan world, or if you've been exposed to import cars and builds, you've probably heard people talk about a CD09 transmission. And that is technically not what this is, but I want to explain a little bit more about that to try to quell some of the misnomers, because people will throw around the term CD09 and sometimes I think they don't actually know what they're talking about. They just think they do, and that's okay because people are learning every day and it happens a lot.
That's right.
But Nissan 350Zs came out in 2003 with V6 6-speed manual, and that transmission, the part number of that transmission ended in CD001. And over the years of the 350Z production, Nissan would roll the part number as they make improvements. And there was a CD002, an 03, and 04, and it ended up in an 009 in the 2006 model year. And since then, there's actually a CD00A, which is a newer revision than the CD009. That last 5 digits of a part number has been applied to all of these different transmissions that Nissan made when it's not actually, in fact, what they're talking about. So, in 2007, Nissan changed the engine in the 350Z, and it's not even a CD at all anymore. It became a JK41 something was the last 5. And then in the 370Z, it became an EA something else. And people will say they're all a CD09, but technically they're not. The bell housing bolt pattern is different. And that might seem like deep dive nerdy stuff that doesn't really matter, but what's important to know is that this is not a CD09, it's not a JK, it's not an EA, it's none of those. Honestly, I forget what the last 5 of the Nissan part number is for this. And it's unimportant. What is important is that the guts inside, the architecture inside this case is the same as that whole family of transmissions. And why that's important is because the CD09 transmissions have been proven to be extremely reliable, extremely durable transmissions. We've used them in applications up to 700-800 wheel horsepower. There have been customers and people out there that have put over 1,000 horsepower through them, and they work great in high power applications. So the guts of this transmission, what's inside, is the same kind of architecture that's made those transmissions super reliable, makes this transmission super reliable. Triple cone synchros in first through third, double cone synchros in fourth, fifth, and sixth. A lot of good stuff inside this trans in a different case. And why we love this transmission for trucks, classic muscle cars and all is because unlike the CD09 transmission that has a remote mounted shifter that hangs off the back like a TR6060 out of a 5th gen Camaro, this has a case mounted shifter. It's directly mounted in the transmission, and it's actually within a ½ inch of the exact same position of a T56 Magnum. So shifter position works great for swaps in trucks and classic muscle cars. Also, the bell housing is much larger on this transmission than a CD09. A CD09 bell is sufficiently small that you can't fit a clutch in it that's bigger than 10-inch diameter. And if you want a small diameter clutch to hold a lot of torque like an LS engine makes, you need to put a stiff clutch in it. That's the only way you can get the mechanical clamping force to hold the torque that engine produces. But because this bell housing is so large, we can actually run a factory LS diameter clutch, a 12-inch clutch, which then means we can have less pedal effort with the same torque holding capacity, and it just makes it nicer for a driver. The CD09, yes, there are adapter options out there that you can cut the bell housing off and then run a GM LS style bell on them, but then you're adding more cost with clutch hydraulics and things to make all that work. Whereas this, we can use all of the factory Nissan clutch release parts. What we did for the adapter for this transmission is we made a billet aluminum adapter plate. These are 6061 hard anodized black. adapter plates that bolt straight to the LS engine, and then this transmission bolts straight to this adapter. We have these adapters for LS engines, for Hemi engines, for Coyote engines, for Godzilla engines. So any of these modern American V8s we can make an adapter plate for to use this transmission behind. And the way the flywheels are designed, we have two options for the LS. This is a billet steel chromoly flywheel. This is a billet aluminum flywheel that we actually literally just released this week. Both options are available for this trans. Street cars, we recommend the steel flywheel, more inertia, better drivability. If you're building a track-focused vehicle, the aluminum flywheel drops some additional weight and helps with engine response. The aluminum flywheels are rebuildable. This friction surface can be unbolted from the flywheel and replaced. So if you ever need to replace your clutch, you can replace the friction surface and not the entire flywheel. The steel flywheel you can bring to a machine shop and have it resurfaced, and just like you would with any other typical steel flywheel. The clutches, like I said, it's an LS style clutch. So this pressure plate would be the same pressure plate you would find on a C5 Corvette. However, the clutch disc has the Nissan spline in the middle. So we sell the clutches as an option with the adapter, but you don't have to get a clutch from us. If you have a favorite clutch supplier out there, you can call them and say, hey, I want an LS1 clutch for a Corvette, but can you build the disc with a Nissan spline in the middle? And if they seem dumbfounded when you ask that question, they're probably not the clutch company you should be working with anyway, because this is a simple thing to do and any clutch manufacturer can do it. We sell it this way, like I said, with the adapter as an option. You don't have to run this clutch. You can run whatever you want as long as your favorite supplier will build that disc for you. Clutch release hardware, we run all of the factory Nissan hardware, the Nissan clutch bearing sleeve, the Nissan release bearing, the Nissan clutch fork, the Nissan slave cylinder. It's an external slave, not an internal slave, which does make serviceability really nice. If you have a hydraulic issue, you don't need to pull the trans off to replace the slave cylinder, it's external. Slave cylinder diameter, we've done the math for a lot of common applications of what size master you should run to work with that slave. Tilton and Willwood and all these other companies out there make various master cylinder diameters that you can run, and we can help you figure out the math on what is required there.
Can I ask a couple questions while we're right here at this end?
Absolutely.
So who's the manufacturer? Is it a Borg Warner? Is it
Nissan.
No, so Nissan.
Yeah, Nissan makes their own transmissions, yep.
Okay.
They're one of the few manufacturers that still does. Even their automatic transmissions, they make themselves.
Okay.
Whereas most other auto manufacturers are like powertrain integrators that they buy transmission from so-and-so, diffs from so-and-so. Yeah. Nissan still makes all that stuff.
And so to go back real quick to the flywheel options, what's the weight of the steel flywheel? Do you know it?
God, I want to say it's like 28 pounds or 26 pounds for the steel flywheel.
Okay, that's good, because the McLeods that we're used to running are like a 30-pound steel flywheel. So.
And then the aluminum's like just a tick under 20. So it's like a 19, 20-pound flywheel. So, and I'm glad you asked, because there was one other thing I wanted to mention. If you've been LS swapping stuff, you are most likely not buying an LS1, LS2, LS3 out of a manual transmission car that you got on eBay. Chances are you're buying a 5.3, 6.0, 6.2 truck motor or a car motor that had an automatic transmission behind it. So if your intention is to put a manual behind it, whatever you bought, you have to buy a flywheel. And if you buy the adapter kit, it comes with a flywheel. If you want to buy a T56, you still have to buy a flywheel. So it's a sunk cost either way. People, will say, well, you don't need it if you're doing an LS type thing. But, and the other important thing too is that we did design this flywheel to use the factory LS starter. So if your dropout came with an automatic, that starter will still work, so you're not buying an additional part to make the swap work. So it's one of the things I wanted to touch on, just to make sure people know what you do have to buy and what you don't have to buy.
Yeah, because there is a bit of an apples to apples comparison when we talk about part costs.
Absolutely.
So with both a T56, which I'm used to, or a TKX, we're buying a gearbox, we're buying a bell housing, a flywheel and clutch set, we're buying bolts, we're buying a shifter, fluids. I mean, so we are comparing components. We're still going to buy the same components. This is just a much more affordable option for the transmission itself.
Absolutely.
And it shows the ability to retain some of the OE pieces.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you bought a quality billet chromoly flywheel or aluminum flywheel for an LS, you're gonna pay $500 or $600 for that flywheel, maybe a little bit more depending on the manufacturer. And if this whole adapter is $1,200 with the flywheel, you're really only talking about $600 additional to use this trans, but this transmission is thousands of dollars less than a T56. So there's really some cost benefit analysis you can do there if you really want to get nerdy on it, you know.
Yeah, can you speak to a little bit about how to procure a trans like this?
Sure. These transmissions are still available brand new from Nissan if you wanted to buy one brand new. And a brand new transmission from Nissan, I believe today you can get for about $2,100, and that's the trans, and it has a bell housing. If you buy a T56 Magnum, you're talking $34.95 without a bell, and then another $200, $300, $400 for a LS1 F-body bell, or even more for, you know, like a QuickTime or whoever else, you know, SFI approved bell. So even a brand new transmission from that perspective is much cheaper than a T56. I would argue that a stock T56 that hasn't had any upgrades done and this from a strength perspective are nearly on par with each other.
Hold up, Guy.
Hey kiddo.
What's up, Guy?
Sorry, I gotta take a break.
No worries.
What you doing? Good morning. Happy Saturday.
Okay, a new transmission is $2,100, $2,200. That's, you're saying that's still out of my budget. This is supposed to be a budget-friendly swap. Well, if you're savvy with searching eBay or carpart.com or local junkyards or Facebook Marketplace, these transmissions can be had for as little as $500. Like this one on the table right here, we paid $500 for. It is a used trans that we cleaned and hit with some aluminum paint to make it look new, but it is a used transmission, and they are fairly inexpensive. I found a junkyard that had 5 of them, and I bought all 5. I paid $2,500 for 5 transmissions. So like,
great.
and,
So great, man.
and we've been stockpiling them, and one of them we're giving to you for your build. One of them's going in an Xterra that we're building. One's going in a Frontier. It's just, they're accessible. Now, we all know that, you know, starting in the 2000s, people bought a lot less manual transmission vehicles, and not as many Frontiers were manual than automatic. And a lot of Frontiers were four-wheel drive, and you can't use the four-wheel drive transmission, although I've been racking my brain on an adapter to make that work too, because there's a ton of them out there. And these transmissions also came in the Xterras. They had the V6, and the Xterras were made two-wheel drive, so you could find this transmission in a manual trans two-wheel drive Xterra as well. A couple other points I want to talk about this transmission in general before diving into other topics though, is that it is a 6-speed manual, but it's a single overdrive. So I want to keep that in mind for later when we talk a little bit, whereas a T56 is a double overdrive. And Nissan, the way they wired their vehicles in the 2000s and to today is their transmissions do not have vehicle speed sensors in them. Nissan would use the ABS system to read wheel speed and communicate wheel speed to vehicle speed via the CAN network from the ABS module to the ECU and the dash. So the ECU did not read drivetrain speed off of the transmission, it got vehicle speed off of the ABS computer. So there is no vehicle speed sensor in this transmission, nor in a CD9 or a JK or any of those other transmissions I mentioned, and that can be problematic for swaps. So what we designed for these is an external speedometer pickup for the tail end of the transmission. There's 17 teeth on here, so you get 17 pulses per rev, just like a stock T56, and that was done intentionally so that from an electronic speedometer perspective calibration, you're getting the same number of pulses per rev, and this sensor is the same output as a stock T56 speed sensor, so a factory GM ECU can read that and wouldn't need recalibration because it's the right number of pulses per rev. You might notice that this gear is pretty thick on here. That is also intentional because in a live axle vehicle, as the suspension cycles, that yoke travels in and out of the transmission. And we have a nice little chart on our website that says, if your drive shaft is this long, it can have this much vertical travel and not lose sync because the gear is thick enough to still keep in line with the sensor. So this is really aimed towards like street vehicles that have 7 to 10 inches of suspension travel. You wouldn't try to use this on like a long travel off-road type build, which you wouldn't be putting a two-wheel drive trans in that truck anyway.
Having us look at it.
Right. And those yokes are available in 1310, 1330, and 1350. So depending on your power level and what you're trying to build, we brought Robbie a 1350 yoke so he can get spicy someday with it and not break his drive shaft. But there's lots of options. And then we designed this short throw shifter for the transmission. If you're looking for a used transmission, try to find one that has the shifter. You can buy the shifters brand new from Nissan, but it's actually probably the hardest thing to find is the shifters for these things because junkyards rip them out and then you have to go find and buy a new one. And a new shifter from Nissan I think is $200. The reason I say all that is because we make this short shifter, but the reverse lockout is built into the shifter. On a T56, it's like an electric solenoid that blocks you from getting to reverse, but it's a mechanical lockout on the Nissan where you actually have to push the shifter down and back to get to reverse. There's pieces inside there that are like injection molded plastic pieces that you have to pull off of the stock shifter to work with our short shifter. So even if you want to run our short shifter, you still need the stock shifter. And I wanted to point that out because that one part can't be bought separately. You have to buy the whole shifter assembly to get that piece. We replicated like a typical Hurst style bolt pattern on the shifter so that any aftermarket shift lever that works with that pattern, you can use in your vehicle. So if you need the shifter to lay forward or lay back or side to side, you can bolt any shifter you want to it.
You talked a little bit about taking this trans and it being used in a classic car, classic truck scenario, and because a lot of those trucks came without overdrive transmissions, a lot of times they have a taller gear. Can you speak to a little bit about the gearing in this trans and how that sort of relates to what we're trying to do?
Absolutely. So trucks and all from the 70s, 80s, even the early 90s came with like turbo 400 transmissions or power glides or turbo 350s, I believe. They didn't have overdrive. The top gear was 1-to-1. So because of that, a lot of those cars and trucks came with super tall final drives in the rear diff. We're talking like 276s, 308s, 323s, whatever in that range, which when you put a T56 in those trucks, those gears suck because the T56 has a 0.7 or 0.5 to 1.6 gear combined with a 276 rear gear. You're like idling at 65 miles an hour. So then you spent all this money on an expensive T56 transmission and now you need to spend money on re-gearing the rear to make it all work together because that transmission really works best with like a 373 or a 410 rear ratio, depending on your tire diameter, of course, and all that. But because this is a single overdrive, sixth gear in this is basically the same as fifth gear in the T56, and first gear is a lot deeper in this transmission than first in a T56. Second in this is like first in a T56. So we actually have on our website a little chart on the same page of this adapter that shows it's a chart of vehicle speed versus RPM in every gear for first through sixth in this when combined with a 307 rear gear, which is like one of the most common classic Chevy rear gear ratios, versus a T56 standard ratio box with a 410. And they almost overlay. First is still a little shorter in this. This is like a 4.1 or a 407 first gear. It's a pretty short first gear. Again, it's a truck transmission, not a car transmission. Sixth gear in this is like a 0.78, whereas I think a T56 is a 0.75. So, you know, when you combine this transmission with the factory gear ratio in the rear of your car, you end up with like great rev range and a great power band use and still a good cruising RPM on the highway, and you're not spending that extra money to re-gear the rear in your car, which is, again, another sunk cost that people don't think about when they want to put a T56 in. When you take all of those things into consideration, it then starts making a lot more sense.
So what I really like so much about this transmission is the complete mechanical reverse lockout. Like, that's just one less thing to have to worry about wiring or automating.
Yep. And the shift pattern is a little bit different from the T56. The T56 reverses all the way to the right and forward. For this, it's all the way to the right and back. And it's a first, second, third, fourth, sixth, but you notice I can't go any further until I push down. Now I can go over and get reverse.
Which is great for someone like me who doesn't have a ton of experience driving a manual 6-speed vehicle.
And like if you try to bypass a reverse lockout in a T56 and you want to shift from fourth to fifth, you can accidentally overshoot over to sixth because you didn't wire that properly or you moved the solenoid or whatever. There's really there's no way to do it.
Yeah, we've seen a bunch of photos even of how burnt up a reverse gear in a T56 can get, even from just touching it. You know, like if you just barely graze, you know, as you're going into fifth gear, you know, it can cause real damage to the reverse gear in a T56. So a couple of the other ports that we were just talking about off camera are reverse light switch and then a neutral safety switch as well.
Yeah, which I didn't even realize until we came that we forgot to bring them with us for Robbie. So we'll be putting them in a UPS box and shipping them to him.
It's all good.
Yeah, if you want to wire a neutral safety into your ECU or your starter circuit, so the starter will only crank when the trans is in neutral, then you don't have to use a clutch safety switch, which means you don't have to push the clutch, which you can get in arguments with people about thrust bearing, you know, in an engine about pushing a heavy clutch pedal every time you need to crank it with zero oil pressure. And if you wire that to the neutral safety switch, it accomplishes the same thing without having to push a clutch to start it. And then reverse lights, obviously, for just making your reverse lights work. The bolt pattern on the bottom of the transmission for the transmission mount bushing is the same as a Chevy. So any of those energy suspension urethane bushings will bolt straight to the transmission mount. The mount offset from drive shaft center line is within a 1/4 inch of a T56. So, you know, most aftermarket cross members for a T56 that have some sliding adjustability will work for this transmission as well.
Beautiful.
And you can get driveline angle set with some shims between the trans mount and the transmission itself.
Yep. There'll be more to speak on that whenever you put this transmission in your frame, because you're going to be running a cross member that's equipped on your inner stiffener.
Yes.
That has, like they've measured for T56s, Turbo 400s, 4L60s, and 80s.
Yep.
So we'll be able to show a real first world, you know, representation of where it landed.
Very cool. Say it's like within 3/4 of an inch front to back of the same position, and within 3/8 of an inch up and down the same position. So if your mount has any adjustability, you can make this work without any real fabrication.
So it's just a recap for my audience, at least. Even comparing new to new prices, we're looking at roughly $1,300 worth of savings in just the transmission itself, if bought new, over a T56 Magnum. And then there is the bell housing money that you've saved as well.
Yeah, I mean, I would say...
And the torque rating is probably very similar.
Yep. I would say you're talking $2,200 for the trans, $1,200 for the adapter, so you're at what, $3,400. Clutch is another $600, which is about the same as what it would be for an LS, so that's a wash. And then starter, you're reusing the LS starter, so if your engine came with the starter, that's a wash. Clutch hydraulics, if you're doing an auto to manual, you're buying the kit to put a master cylinder anyway. It's the same kit no matter what. Short shifter, you know, worth $300 on this shifter, and most performance shifters for a T56 are the same price. And the external speedo pickup's $200. So,
and then if we get into the salvage yard stuff, this transmission is much cheaper than a TR6060 or even an old T56 Magnum used to use. They're all, you know, they're half of a third the cost.
There's the intangible too. Like this feel is pretty stellar in this transmission.
Yep.
When I've had some people using colorful language to describe how a T56 feels when it's got a stock shifter.
That's right.
And they feel pretty awesome. So I'm not trying to say it's the right answer for everybody. It's not. There is no right answer for everybody. There's people that the T56 is the right trans for what they're doing. And I'm not going to argue that. I've got a T56 based transmission in my race truck, not one of these. But for specific people, this is a great option that even saves some money and still have a great driving 6-speed manual instead of an old 4-speed H pattern or an old, you know, TKO 500. I mean, this I think is still cheaper to you running a new TKO transmission.
Yeah,
I would argue this is way better than a TKO for a lot of applications. So, yeah.
I'm excited about it. I think it's going to work well for what we've got going in our OBS. I mean, this is something we three have been talking about for months now. Yeah. And, you know, with the limited research I've done, but with your expertise and Jesse's expertise, I mean, this is going to fit what we've got going with this crate motor and this truck perfectly. Absolutely. Because there's a mix of street and track, you know, and so obviously it's probably going to spend more time on the street, but I'm really trying to learn how to really drive this thing and be able to take it on a course and a track and really, you know, have the kind of fun that you guys are having.
The one thing I wanted to touch on that I forgot to mention earlier was that if you notice on this bell housing, there's a little cutout here for the factory starter. It is not in the exact same spot as an LS. So part of the instructions, you can download them on the website and look, is you would actually take the adapter plate before you install it on the engine, put it on the transmission, and you can see that this part of the casing right here is in the way of the snout of the starter. So you lay the adapter plate on there mark that with a marker, and then you have to come in and basically use a flat disc grinder or something to remove this boss inside the bell housing so that the LS starter snout can fit in there. It doesn't ruin any structural integrity, and you can still use the transmission in its stock application when you're done if you wanted to in the future. But we intentionally didn't do that to this transmission before bringing it because we wanted to be able to show that to you guys, full disclosure. And the adapter plate also is clearanced on the back side here for Gen 5 engine direct injection fuel pumps. So the adapter plate actually works with LS and LT. We offer them for LT as well. The flywheel is an 8-bolt for an LT, and it's a 6-bolt for an LS. We also can do an 8-bolt for like a LSA or even a 9-bolt if you're a baller and putting this transmission behind an LS9. But I think if you have LS9 money, you're not putting this transmission behind it. But we can do it for you if you want. And built-in dust shield, bolts to the factory LS oil pan mounts as well, if you're running one of the factory cast style oil pans. And yeah, that's about it. I think we had mentioned earlier in the video, but the adapter plate is dual drilled for both LS and LT. And it's actually drilled for small block Chevy too, which we can do these for small block Chevys, but the flywheels are special order for those, and you need to let us know if your engine's internal balanced or external balanced and all that good stuff. So reach out if you got one of those setups, but work with all.
What'd you bring to it, Joe?
Space camper.
Oh,
Plug it for the
how you doing, man?
sponsor. Good, how are you?
Yeah, love it. God, if we end up getting that kind of sponsor, that'd be insane.
Terrible. An alcohol sponsor?
Yeah, I mean, we would be in bad shape.
I would have to quit my normal job to do YouTube.
We'd be in bad shape.
Yeah, Jesse was doing fine on his YouTube channel.
He got a Milwaukee's Best sponsorship.
Oh, well, let's aim a little bit higher than that.
Oh, come on, Busch Light, man. I'm just kidding.
That's more accurate to the area.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
The pilot bearing is installed with the step facing out, and you can run it down till it bottoms out and the spacing's correct. So, sweet.
Loctite somewhere.
Yeah, we'll have to find some Loctite for the flywheel.
That's exactly the response I thought I was going to get. I showed you.
Right? Yeah.
I love it. That's,
Oh, got to.
Like intake and
Yeah.
torque ropes.
So now we're just installing the clutch onto the flywheel, which pretty standard stuff for an LS 6-bolt pressure plate. What we're doing is just lightly running in the bolts right now without putting any clamping force on. And what you'll notice on a clutch when you install, which a lot of people, I've received a certain quantity of tech questions over the years. When I go to put my pressure plate on and there's a big gap, it won't sit flush. And that's intentional because, like I had said earlier about how a clutch is essentially a brake in reverse, a brake has no clamping force when you're not applying a pressure, and when you apply pressure, the caliper bites on the rotor. A clutch is the opposite. When you bolt this down, these springs inside the diaphragm compress and apply force, the clamping force on the clutch disc, and then when you press the fingers in, you release the clamping force, which allows the disc to spin freely inside the clutch. So it's reverse, and the gap is here because there's no load on the springs. But once we tighten it down, you'll notice all of these fingers will start pulling in until they're flat, and that's the clamping force being applied to the disc. So right now, I can go in here and kind of wiggle the disc around a little bit. You can see it move a little. I'm gonna try to do my best to get this. We have the alignment tool in there, but there's always a little bit of play in these, and if I go like so, now the disc can't move anymore because I just put a little bit of clamping force on it.
Also, we're still waiting on our headers from Ultimate, so Jesse and Dylan are providing these little stickers just to block off the ports.
So we actually had a sticker company make us a full spool of those. Really? Yeah, it's like twofold. One, you could seal off a motor with them, or the other, you could spray paint a motor with them.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, that was what our first intention was just the speed of passing Cerakote motors.
Okay.
Sweet. Jimmy set this down.
So we're,
Now that you put the camera there, I'm not going to use my normal technique for doing this. 'Cause
Oh,
it would
come
be,
on.
It would be straddle and squat.
hey, I can use that too, you know?
You going onto these dowels?
Yes.
Eventually, yes, but we got to get.
You go up to the back a little.
Spline feels like it's in.
I don't think it is.
Never mind. There you go. You need to rotate clock. There you go. I'm splined up.
All right, I'm down
Dally it.
here.
Just gotta.
You need some up and down jiggles. Little jounce.
There it goes, Blaine. Look at you.
Real spline master.
What do you say, Steven?
What do I say? I say awesome.
Me too.
Mission success.
Yeah, mission accomplished right here. So the EA200 trans out of the VQ40 Frontier, yes, mounted to the crate LS364 450. Man, I can't wait to get this thing in the truck.
Can we get full gratification right now? Put the intake on?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's do it.
Just set it.
All right, guys, that's going to conclude this video. Hope you enjoyed learning more about the engine and transmission that we're going to be putting in our 88 Silverado. No, it's not even a Silverado. It's a Scottsdale base model, y'all, base model. 88 Scottsdale Brownie. Super pumped about this. Big thanks to LOJ Conversion for coming over, helping us out with the AE 200 6-speed manual trans. This thing is super awesome. Cannot wait to show you guys what this thing can do on the street and on the track. And big thanks to Holley Performance and Gandrud Chevrolet for helping us out with all the EFI, mid-mount, engine, everything we got going for this engine and trans combo. We'll be telling you more about it as we go forward on this build, but really appreciate you guys tuning in to this video, and we'll catch you next time right here on United by Trucks.